Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Welcome. And just before we have anything else, we've got a safety warning for you. Jane, will you do that?
Thank you, Chair. The fire alarm is not due to go off this afternoon. If it does go off, please make your way to the nearest exit, which is down the staircase you've just come through, or at the back of the room. The fire assembly point is at the front of the car park near the exit barrier, and please do not use the lifts. Thank you.
Some of you perhaps are on your first visit to this committee, so I'd just like to say a few things which might help you. You'll see a load of people in front of you, and the people basically down that side there are the voting members of a committee. They will be the people who you'll hear debating the applications, and also they will be the people who are voting. Along here, of course, I'm the chairman, I'm Bill Hunt, I'm a member, and so is my vice chairman, David Brown. But all the others are officers who are here in a planning capacity or in a legal capacity. Generally speaking, and I don't know what today is going to take, but generally speaking, we would have a comfort break at around about 2 hours. And the toilet, should you want to go out at any time, if you go out of that door there, you turn left. If you go out of this door, you go straight ahead. So please help yourself if you feel you need a comfort break. Would you please turn off any mobile phones that you have, or at least put them onto silent or something so it doesn't interfere. Now I'm going back to apologies and substitutions. Item number 1.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Holtzman, Councillor Lay and Councillor Edwards, and Councillor Colbert and Councillor Huffer are here attending as substitutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move on to item number 2. Have any members got any declarations of interest? No. I now look at the minutes of the last meeting. Members will have read those minutes, and is there any reason why after this meeting I shouldn't sign them as being genuine? No. We now quickly move on to item number 4, and I'd like to say welcome to David Morton, who is our new temporary planning manager. Our last planning manager moved on to pastures, maybe greener, maybe not, I don't know. And David has filled the gap, and we welcome him to East Cambs District Council. We're sad to say, though, that Gavin Taylor is leaving us, and I believe this is his last planning meeting, but we wish him very best of luck and good fortune. And you never know, we might see you back here, I don't know. And we finally, on housekeeping, Gemma Driver is now a senior planning officer, and we congratulate her on that promotion. Now, having said all that, we now move on to item number 5, which is an application for 39 affordable dwellings in Little Downham, and will the officer now make the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So first item, planning application today, agenda item 5, application 2101-322 FUM. It's a proposal for 39 affordable dwellings with associated infrastructure at land southwest of Ely Road there, Little Downham. Just refer to the update report that went to members yesterday in respect of agreement to the planning conditions, and that further representation letter that was also circulated. So just looking at the site, it's about 1.9 hectares or 4.7 acres of agricultural land, say, set at the southwest of Little Downham. Includes also some agricultural buildings there you can see along the northern boundary of the site. The site's at low risk of flooding, having regard to the Environment Agency's mapping. There are a number of TPO trees along the frontage within the highway, close to sort of the access point. And there's also a TPO tree within the site adjacent to the existing dwelling. So just in context, sort of with the wider settlement there, that slide just shows sort of where it's positioned relative to the sort of wider area of Little Downham. Just quickly going through some photographs. So you can see there the sort of the site access with the dwelling that's sat there. That dwelling is proposed to be demolished as part of this development. Views sort of along Ely Road, heading north and heading south there. And these are photos within the site. You can see the agricultural buildings also proposed to be demolished. The bottom left photograph shows Old Fir Close development, just sort of to the north of the site, beyond that brick wall. And the bottom right photograph is sort of heading back towards Ely Road, showing the backs of those properties that currently front Ely Road. The photograph at the top left is a view sort of west across sort of the countryside there. And alternatively, the bottom right photo is a view from Hurst Lane, the right of way, which faces east, and you can sort of see in the background the sort of where the site would be over to the left there. So the proposal is for 39 dwellings, all affordable. It's utilising the existing access with an upgrade, incorporates a mixture of dwellings in line with negotiations that have been had with the council in terms of affordable housing mix that's required to meet the need in the settlement. There's an area of green space in the centre, as you can see. Proposal is to partially equip that and soft landscape it. There's also a proposal to provide off-site contributions to youth play space to the existing recreation ground to the north of the site. On-site attenuation, as you can see there on the top right corner of the map, and biodiversity mitigation and enhancement. So the main considerations which are set out in the report there are sort of principal, access, visual and residential impacts, drainage, ecology, and those infrastructure contributions. So obviously in terms of principle, Growth 2 supports rural exception sites, particularly through HOW 4, subject to those criteria being met, which are generally a demonstration of need, that the countryside is protected so there are no significant harms, and obviously the scale of the development is sort of appropriate in the context of the area. So in terms of local need, the developer has undertaken a local housing needs assessment and also considered the council's current housing needs as well for people with a local connection with Little Downham. Our latest housing register indicates 55 persons registered with local connections. The actual HNA that was submitted it identified 59 dwellings or households requiring housing at that time. As I say, the council's housing team have negotiated a mix. And in summary, there is considered to be robust evidence that this development would go toward meeting that need for people on the current register. In terms of how it's connected to the wider settlement, uses the existing established access point. There are good road links to the settlement and the wider district. And there's also a proposal to sort of connect better to the existing pedestrian infrastructure within the settlement, so that there's good access, sustainable access to services and facilities. In terms of its impact on the countryside, it sits immediately adjacent to development. It's not shown on that plan, but the Old Fir Close development sits immediately adjacent to the north. Residential development in ribbon form also extends southwards beyond the plan shown there. The actual development itself is considered to be sort of similar in scale and appearance to the Old Fir Close development. Substantial boundary planting would reduce its sort of impact as it transitions into the countryside as well. So subject to sort of those boundary treatments and materials, it's considered that it would assimilate well into the built environment and that transition to the countryside. In addition, the legal agreement would secure the affordable housing in perpetuity through the Section 106 agreement, which is currently being drafted. So in principle, the development can be supported through those criteria under HOW 4. Just in terms of access, so the existing access is proposed to be upgraded. There's proposed to be a pedestrian access, as you can see, adjacent to the Suds Pond, which would link out onto Ely Road. In addition to that, there's a proposal to upgrade the existing footpath that leads away from the site, connecting up to Old Fir Close, whereby there's a further pedestrian route to the north of the settlement to Cannon Street, which would sort of ensure and sort of secure sustainable travel and transport modes. The proposal is to build to adoptable standards, with waste collection being collected on site, tracking's been provided which is suitable. The development secures adequate parking in line with the current policies, and it's considered that in general it accords with the local plan policies steering transport and highways impacts. In terms of visual amenity, again, scale of the development is similar to that at Old Fair Close. It's considered that appropriate materials could be secured. The ones proposed seem appropriate given how they relate to the Old Fair Close development. And in general, with the mix of dwelling styles that have been proposed, it's considered it would complement the character and appearance of the area in line with local and national policies. In terms of amenity, the dwellings themselves are positioned with adequate separation so that future occupiers should achieve a high quality living environment. Window positions on one of the dwellings has been altered so that it doesn't create overlooking onto an existing garden. That's down bottom left of the map as shown there. Again, adequate parking is provided. A lighting scheme is required to ensure that appropriate lighting for residents is secured, which needs to be balanced with obviously biodiversity, which we'll come on to shortly, and boundary treatments and security detail for gates, etc. A scheme is yet to be agreed, which can be secured through condition. In terms of drainage, as I say, the site is at low risk of flooding. The proposal is to attenuate on site the surface water drainage, and then any additional volume that leaves that drainage pond is supposed to be directed under the road to the drain to the what is the southwest of the site, shown on that plan as a blue dashed line, leaving the site. So it should dispose of the surface water appropriately. The LFA have considered the application and asked for amendments throughout negotiations, and they're now comfortable and happy with the scheme, subject to final detailed design. Angling Water also confirmed they've got capacity to take foul flows, and the IDB would require consent once the discharge rate has been agreed. So just to note, the council has a legal duty to ensure that protected species are managed appropriately and due regard is given to those. So as I mentioned, the existing dwelling is proposed to be demolished. That dwelling does incorporate at the moment in the loft a maternity bat roost. It's considered that the rehoming of the bats would therefore be necessary given the necessity to demolish that dwelling. Details of the specific strategy of doing that would need to be agreed through a licensing regime. But nonetheless, the strategy proposed so far in principle has satisfied the Wildlife Trust and our ecology officer that it's likely that a license would be forthcoming should it be applied for. The proposal is to rehome the bats to a bat hut shown in a yellow circle on the plan, which is immediately adjacent to a suds pond. The existing surveys that have been done on bats suggest that there's quite a lot of bat activity in that area in terms of foraging. So it seems a logical place for that bat hut to be relocated. It's important that's done under license and in advance of any of the development occurring. In terms of tree impacts, the blue circle, as you can see on the plan there, that is a TPO tree. Our tree officer has raised concerns that may become a burden for existing residents because of its proximity to their gardens, which may put pressure on that tree to be removed. The applicant has provided a solution in terms of direct access for them as part of a management company to manage that tree, so therefore not requiring residents to do such. And that's considered on balance to be an acceptable solution. In addition to that, as I said, there are trees along the highway. The two green circles shown are not TPO trees, but nonetheless they sit either in line or slightly askew of the footpath proposed and the drainage that may go under that area. So therefore that needs to be managed accordingly. And the sort of final drainage strategy and surfacing of footpaths and highways is yet to be agreed, but obviously that would need to be duly considered. So in terms of infrastructure contributions, as I said, there's play equipment proposed on site, off-site contribution to the local park recreation ground shown in the yellow circle on the plan. There's also education and libraries contributions proposed as well. And the 106 would be expected to secure that affordable housing as well, and obviously offered to those with local connections. So just sort of looking at all those ingredients, the introduction of the dwellings would meet where there appears to be a strong indication of local need. The bungalows proposed would also include an M42 standard, so therefore accommodating elderly or infirm people to live in. It wouldn't result in significant harm to the character of the countryside, given the proposal to sort of secure those robust soft landscape and boundary treatments, and appropriate mitigation is proposed in terms of biodiversity, with opportunities to enhance as well and achieve net gain. There are no technical concerns, subject to obviously the final details secured through conditions in terms of drainage and highways, etc. And it's considered that it does accord with the development plan when taken as a whole and would constitute sustainable development. The recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a comprehensive report. We have speakers registered, and the first one is Ian Massey. Would you please come up and sit at the table? Please make sure you turn the microphone on. You have 5 minutes, and you'll have a red light go on when you're on.
Thank you. That's right. That's right.
Right, away you go.
Thank you very much. Afternoon. I'm Ian, and I live on Old Fir Close, which is just adjacent to this proposal. I'm objecting to this development because of its size, the infrastructure demands, the highway safety and location of part of the site being on a low level. Now, I understand the need for housing, and I understand the need for the use of a brownfield site, of which this is part. But the number of houses is not really in keeping with the rest of Little Downham. Old Fir Close is 27. Most of the other developments have been less than that. They've been in their 20s, not in their 30s. We've got a foul drainage issue. The houses further down the street are having to fit non-return valves onto their sewage systems because the sewage is backing up into their houses. So I've just heard another story, exactly the same thing. We have got surface water flooding. It's happening quite frequently, even though it says it isn't. 13 of these houses are below the 7-metre finished floor level. So that's the level of your carpet. All right, we're down below 7 metres. We know how high the tides are, all the flooding potential there. So we've also got a surface, the pond outlet is 5.8 metres and your carpets are at 6.5. So you're quite close on that bottom end of the site. Why do you want to allow on the bottom half of that site for these houses to be built when coming on with climate change, they're going to be put at risk? We've also got a groundwater issue. Further up the street on Ely Road, a spring has appeared. And the water, when it rains, gushes out of the ground. There's more water appearing on the lower part of that site as well. So again, why are you allowing people to build in these lower level areas? We have a highways access issue. Old Fir Close highway access is 5 metres wide. If you are trying to turn into Old Fir Close off the main road, off the road, you cannot get in because if there's a car trying to come out, that creates a dangerous situation. The new design for this estate, which is only 33 metres from the other one, is exactly the same type of design and will have exactly the same problems. I've discussed this with highways and there's all sorts of issues. Now, in theory, Ely Road is a 30 miles an hour. I've been out and monitored the speed of those cars and 53% are speeding in excess of 30 miles an hour. And there's many who are exceeding that by a considerable amount. So if you're going to approve any of this, you really need to be putting a condition in to say we need to have some form of traffic calming on that road because somebody's going to get seriously injured there because we've got enough trouble with our estate, add another one 33 metres away and you're really into problems. So in summary, what I'd like you to do, please, is look at some way which you're allowed to do is to reduce the number of houses on that estate, keep it to the higher level area, improve the highway access by doing some traffic calming, and then you will go some way towards meeting your, and I'm sure you've all read your climate and natural environment chapter in your local plan, the scoping and draft statement. You'll be going some way towards that. So I'm trying to suggest as a minimum that there's some deferral on this until you've sorted out these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you just stay where you are for a second.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Bill.
Members, any questions? Councillor Ambrose Smith and then Councillor Trapp.
I'm not entirely sure that we can ask the county council who have the highways responsibilities to put in different speed limits or different calming measures. I just make that point. No doubt the officers would be able to advise on that.
I have had discussions with some of your people because we've been out already. We've had quite a few discussions. We've had other councillors out as well because it is a concern at the present with our estate access already. And one of my real and genuine concerns, the genuine concern, is that putting another estate access right next to that without doing something is going to give you a bit of a problem. If I can digress slightly, I've made other presentations, not in this county. I've only just recently moved here, so I bring with you some experience from Cumbria. And I had the same discussions on another estate. The councillors said yes, approved, and then we ended up with problems of having to fund via the county council measures.
This is meant to be a very quick exchange of questions.
I know,
and
I'll make that point to you.
Thank you.
As best I
Councillor
can,
Trapp.
Bill. Sorry, I am concerned.
Councillor Trapp.
I haven't put the microphone on. I thought I spoke loudly enough. There is a bit of concern about the flooding. Is it the three houses that are in between this site that are the ones that need whatever it is reversed?
I haven't. Well, I've just spoken to Bruce, who lives in the bungalow, and he says he's getting problems. But I've spoken to the people who are further down Ely Road on the.
So they're to the right of that plan, are
They're
they?
to the right of the plan, and they're saying that their main sewage
Yes.
is not going away. What's happening is that there's the rainfall, it blocks up because of the combined sewers. It's backing up, and they're fitting on their developments valves to stop the sewage coming back up into their house.
Right. We were there this morning, but I can't remember what the level of difference in height is between this development and those.
My understanding is it's the bottom end at 6.5. The houses at the bottom end are 6.5 meters AOD.
Yeah.
The top end's about 8 meters
Yes.
AOD.
But what
so
about
the
the
bottom
one-
end is similar to the other side on the other side.
So
I'm not familiar with the plumbing. I've been out and looked.
Right.
I've had discussions, but nobody can tell me exactly where all the plumbing is.
So you think there's a considerable risk of back sewage coming up?
I haven't. I'm all right. I'm at
I'm-
9 meters, but the people who are down at the 6 and 7 meters are struggling with the sewage. So somebody needs to do something within there to sort that, and this is only going to make it worse.
Okay. And also, I noticed lots of flooding in that bottom of that field.
There's water in the field. Now, my concern is that we've got much more water. We've had the wettest February we've got on record, and the water is coming down more and more. I've spent a long time with the councillors and the authorities trying to sort out all this drainage because it is backing up. And this at this size is going to give you more problems later on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's it, except for just a couple of, I'd like to make a comment. One of the judgments we have to make is, will this application increase the risk or flooding? So
Yes.
if there is flooding on a field that isn't part of this application, our judgment would be, would it make it worse? And we take expert advice from the local flood authority. And of course, they are qualified where perhaps we didn't do it. As a side issue as well, your parish council have an ability to make applications to the county council for help towards speed restrictions in your village, and you may well wish to go to your parish council. We are not a highway authority.
Of course. And of course, we have a
Okay.
parish councillor coming to speak.
So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
We have the applicant now, and it's Mr. Ahmed. It's 5 minutes, and it's already, the red light's already
Thanks very
on.
much. Please excuse me if I don't look at you as I read this, because I'm reading a statement, if that's perfectly acceptable. Thank you very much. So good afternoon. I'm here today on behalf of Accent Housing to express our support for the development of 39 home rural exception site in Little Downham. This project represents a significant opportunity to address the pressing need for affordable housing in our community, and I'm pleased to outline the compelling reasons why this proposal deserves your approval. Firstly, I would like to highlight Accent Housing commitment to excellence in housing provision. As a V1G1 rated housing association, we have a proven track record of delivering high quality, sustainable homes that meet the needs of our residents. Currently, we are actively engaged in 200 affordable homes in East Cambridgeshire District Council, demonstrating our dedication to addressing the housing crisis in this region. Housing associations are not-for-profit organisations. We are set up to provide affordable homes and support local communities. We don't make profits for shareholders. Instead, we invest all the income that we make delivering on our social purpose. This includes building new affordable homes for people who need them, investing in the safety and quality of existing homes, running community services and providing care and support for older people who need it. For every £1 of government investment, housing associations invest £6 of their own money into the development of affordable homes. Accent Housing is making a long-term commitment to all communities they work in. We also invest in regenerating poor quality homes and work closely with partners like local authorities and residents to create happy, thriving places where people want to live. At present, there are 329 households that have expressed Little Downham as a preference to live. The Housing Needs Survey carried out by Cambridgeshire Acre, a respected independent organisation with a century-long legacy of supporting rural communities, provides clear evidence of the demand for affordable housing in this locality. The report identified 59 households with a direct local connection and in need of affordable housing. This survey has received endorsement from East Cambridgeshire District Council, underscoring its credibility and relevance in the planning process. One of the key factors of our developments is our commitment to environmental sustainability. All our homes are designed and constructed to achieve Energy Performance Certificate rating of A, ensuring energy efficiency and reduction carbon emissions. By prioritising sustainability, we are not only providing comfortable living spaces for our residents, but also contributing to the broader goal of combating climate change and addressing the cost of living crisis all families are facing. It is important to emphasise that all homes developed on this rural exception site will be designated as affordable in perpetuity. This means that they will be made available exclusively to local residents with a genuine connection to the area as defined in the Section 106 agreement. Furthermore, the selection of residents will be facilitated through a nominations agreement by East Cambridgeshire Council District Council, ensuring that those local residents in most need are prioritised for this scheme. The selected contractor for this project will be carried out in collaboration with that shares the commitment to social value. Lastly, I'm pleased to inform that this proposal has full support of the planning officer and endorsement of the LLFA, highways and other statutory authorities. In conclusion, the development of a 39 rural exception site in Little Downham represents a unique opportunity to address the acute shortage of affordable housing in our community. With Accent Housing proven track record, commitment to sustainability and partnership with local stakeholders, we are confident that this project will not only meet but exceed expectations of all parties involved. We respectfully urge the Planning Committee to approve the proposal, thereby paving the way for the creation of much needed affordable local homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you just sit where you are, and
Thank
I'll
you.
ask members, have you got any questions for the applicant? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. There's a few questions. First question is, I note that the ECDC trees team raised a concern last December in regards to some concerns not being addressed. Can you comment on that, please?
Sorry, what concerns were those? Sorry.
In regards to the tree, CMT8 trees?
The trees. On this particular scheme, I don't know which tree you're referring to. That tree over there, the tree officer.
Yes.
Oh, that tree over there, we've discussed that with the tree officer and they feel that the mitigation we've designed across there satisfies their concerns.
Okay, I think the last comment from them last December still mentions that their concerns have not been addressed.
Okay,
That's dated 21st of December 2023.
I believe the issue has been resolved and has been discussed by the tree officer by East County City Council. Gavin, I don't know, sorry, I don't know if I should address you directly, Gavin.
So you're answering that question.
Did you want to come back to me after questions and I'll mop those questions up if that's okay?
Of course, yes. The next question is in regards to the play equipment being provided in the play area, and can you confirm of the play equipment is inclusive?
Yes, that forms part of the development. We discuss it with the local authority on what type of play equipment will be most appropriate. And we work that through the plan and we have to submit a plan that shows the play equipment and that comes as a condition, I believe.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. And thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Couple of questions as well. First of all, I really approve of the design you've done there with this sort of central green space and everything around it, and that's great. And we want to have more developments like this rather than sort of series ranks of housing. So thank you very much for that. Just what the previous applicant, the previous speaker Ian mentioned about the access to the site. One is slightly concerned about that it is quite narrow, it looks like.
In our view, we took advice from our engineer in consultation with Cambridgeshire Highways, and they felt the design and access to be appropriate. But part of the planning process is that we have to submit a technical approval in order to approve the exact design of the access. And at that time, we can engage with the Cambridgeshire County Council in order to make sure they're fully comfortable with that design, to make sure they feel it's safe. So part of the planning process and during construction is a planning condition to say that we must submit a design that's approved by Cambridgeshire County Council. With all due respect, I'm not an expert, and you employ many experts and specialists, and therefore I can't say, oh yes, that's fine, it's perfect. That's an ongoing conversation with the engineers that we employ during the construction and the engineers at Cambridgeshire Highways. And if they warrant that we do certain design changes to make it safe, to make it the visibility display so people can see it safe. If they require us to do that, that's part of planning and we have to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. So that might be a solution forward is to actually.
The Cambridgeshire County Council will say, right, okay, in terms of that's your design. Actually, we want you to do a little bit more. We want you to do this. Can you do that? And then we will look to incorporate that.
Thank you very much. Another question I have is one about flooding.
Okay.
Once again, Ian mentioned this.
You did,
First of all, I think you're seeking permission to drain these suds into the IDB thing. Do you think? I mean, have you made any progress on this so far?
In terms of that, in terms of the drainage strategy, that's been approved by the LFA and the various authorities and our engineer. We have engaged with the IDB. They are open to that, subject to flow rates that's acceptable to them. So the conversations have taken place. There's a fee we have to pay in order to do that. So we've even had that conversation as well, but they won't really agree to anything until, do you know, when we talk about the technical approval for the road, we have to provide a technical approval for the drainage as well. So they want to see all the calculations to make sure the flow rates are acceptable to them. And then we will submit that, we will make sure it is. and we will do whatever we can to do that. And then the IDB
Okay, thank you very
provide that.
much.
So, is that okay?
Further question is, how many, you were saying about 200 affordable houses being built at the
Yes.
moment by you. How many other ones have already been built?
Okay, we've got 50 in Haddenham. We're currently on site in Witchford Ely. We're due to take handover of 48 affordable homes. They're coming through this year. We've got 50 homes at Bottisham off, I can't remember what site it is. We bought it from the university. Anyway, on Bottisham, so there's 50 homes there as well. And then I believe there's another site in East Cambridgeshire which we're looking to deliver as well. They're all 100% affordable. They're all non-for-profit. They're all to be delivered to EPCA rating.
Thank you very much. And do you have houses outside East Cambridge?
We do. We have houses in Huntingdonshire, South Cambridgeshire, Fenland. Currently at present, we're delivering 200 affordable homes in Fenland across various sites. We're delivering 150 in Huntingdonshire. We've just delivered 75 affordable homes in Peterborough, all built to EPCA rating, all built to NDSS, and that was all for.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Councillor Goodell.
Thank you very much, Chair. Some of my questions have just been answered
Okay.
with Jojo, but one I'd like to bring up, because the previous gentleman had mentioned, would you consider putting in non-return valves in the sewage on the lower end of the site?
Councillor, all due respect, I don't know what a non-return valve is. I'm not an expert or technical. Mr. Massey maybe, but I'm not.
All a non-return valve does is ensure that the sewage will only flow one way and it won't come back again.
Council, we will do whatever is required by the engineers involved. Whatever they recommend, they feel appropriate, that's the solution we should do.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. How many of them are rented and how many are
Okay.
shared ownership?
Now, if you notice, the ones in amber are shared ownership, the remaining ones are rented. So I believe it's 9 that are shared ownership, and the remaining ones are affordable rent, capped at local housing allowance.
Right, and the shared ownership, do they have unlimited share ownership? Can they staircase right up to 100% or have they
yes.
stop?
What we're hoping, there's 2 things that you can do. There's that you can have an 80% restriction, or you can have a staircase into 100%. And when you do a staircase into 100%, there's a thing called, I'm getting a bit technical, so please, there's a thing called a buyback clause. So if you buy all of it and then you want to sell it on the open market, you can't. You sell it back to us. You sell it back to the housing association, and then we sell it again as a shared ownership, but sell it at 25%. That somebody else can buy only just 25% of it. So you can buy all of it, but you can't sell it on the open market. You have to sell it back to us. So we make it again, shared ownership, again and again and again. And it's called a buyback clause. And that's written into the section 106. And that's already been discussed with East Cambridge District Council. And that ensures it remains shared ownership in perpetuity.
So these houses all going to be affordable forever, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah, and it's tied in with the section 1. As long as we're here, and we are here, we're a G1, V1 rated, they're affordable in perpetuity forever.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hold on, Councillor Trapp, yes.
So just when you say they buy back,
Yes.
they
We-
buy back at the current
Yeah,
market.
so
rate. It's not
yes,
the previous price or anything. It's
Yeah. we buy it back at the market rate, and
Okay.
then we sell it as a shared ownership, and we can sell it from 10% up to, I believe it's 80%.
And the rest of it is paid by rent, is it? Or what?
Yes, the rest of it is paid by rent. So it works out that if somebody purchases 25%, they get a mortgage for 25%, and
Yeah.
the 75%, excuse me, sorry about that, is, people call it a rent, but I feel that's not fair because it's not rented, they're a leaseholder. So it's like a charge, and that amount is fixed by Homes England. They say you cannot charge more than 2.75% of the remaining equity. So even if bank rates are 5% or 6%, we can't charge more than 2.75.
Okay.
And
so-
our rents are also, capped by the government. We can't put 5, 10, 15% on our rents every year. the government put a strict cap on housing association rents, where we only can do CPI +1 and that's it, rather than CPI +5 or let us charge whatever we want to.
Because I think there are some housing associations which charge a rent or charge, as you say, and that is actually equivalent to having 100% mortgage or more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's sometimes, do you know, probably many years ago when base bank rates were 2% and you're paying 2.75, but it's what I know now is that buying a 30% share or a 40% share of a shared ownership house is less than paying rent on a house with a private landlord. And what happens for these, what I feel strongly about these is when anybody who lives here, they won't get anybody knocking on their door saying your rent's going up £100 next month. Or I want you out because I want to charge more.
If we can, it's just brief
Sorry,
questions from the.
Sometimes I get on.
Thank you very much for a very clear and lucid explanation.
Thank you.
Thank you, right, members. Thank you, sir.
Is it okay?
Oh, hold on, we've got Councillor Colbert.
It's okay, thank you, Chairman. I think we've got there. I just wanted to check that the buyback was at market value
Yes.
at that time.
At that time.
That's all, thank you, that's
Yeah.
all I want.
So it gives people comfort that they know that they can sell it. And then,
Yeah, yes, exactly, thank you.
Thank you very much
Oh,
indeed.
sorry.
Hold on.
I think that's for Gavin.
Are we asking questions about this application or generally the ethics or whatever of affordable?
This application.
If it's to do with the application in Little Down, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It just in regards to the bungalows, do they have wet rooms?
Yeah, what we're hoping to do is what we do with all our bungalows and ground floor flats is engage with East Cambs District Council about 8 months before we start going. And what we say is, look, these are bungalows. You may have people that have mobility issues. Come and talk to us. Come, let me talk to your OT, your occupational therapist, for those particular people. And if they need wider doors, if they need a knockout panel, if they need a hoist, we'll build it in order to incorporate those. We've done one at Peterborough where we engaged 8 months prior for the residents moving. So when those residents moved in, every handrail was in the right place, because you can't just put a handrail anywhere. It depends on those persons' needs. So that's what we do. We early engagement with East Cambs. So what we do is we flag it up, say, you need to let us know, because in 2 months' time, we're going to start doing stuff which we can't go back on. So let us know what you want us to do. Have you got a family identified? Please go out there, find a local family identified, and let's try and design this bungalow to suit their needs before we have to finish it and then knock it to pieces to suit their needs. Or you're trying to put a round peg in a square hole, or the other way around. So we just want to make sure it's right for the person, otherwise there's no point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, well, we've got Councillor Whelan.
Just looking at the plan, parking.
Yeah.
Around there, I assume that they've got parking spaces, or
Yeah.
where, bearing in mind, I know how people park on the road
Yeah.
and how that would cause a problem maybe.
I understand in terms of that, the parking provision is as per the requirements, and there's visitor spaces along there, which we believe, I'm not sure, I can't say whether they exceed what's the minimum, but I believe there's adequate parking for those homes, and we have to provide enough parking for homes. So if you
So
find
are there off-road, if it's off-road parking on? for that?
on-road parking, hopefully that'll be an adopted road. I've got no, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 visitors there.
Okay.
And we're building to adoptable standards, so hopefully Cambridgeshire County Council will adopt the site. I don't know if they will decide to put double yellow lines on it at all.
Right, okay.
That's their decision. And it's their decision whether they want to adopt it, but we will build it to adoptable standards.
So it's basically, it looks like 2 parking spaces per.
Yeah, I think the requirements are for anything above a 2 to a 3 bedroom is 2 parking spaces. I believe Gavin will be able to confirm what is Cambs District Council policies, but it's generally for a 2 and a 3 bed, it's 2, for a 4 bed, it's 3, but I'm not too sure.
Okay, Thank you.
Councillor Whelan, if you want a really firm answer to that question, I suggest you ask the planning officer when it comes to the stage where you will be asked to ask questions from there. Okay, thank you very much indeed,
Thank you.
sir.
It was my first time at East Council. Thank you very
And
much.
can you turn your microphone off for a minute?
Yeah.
And now we have Councillor Peter. We can have the fan off. My papers are having to be weighted down. Okay, we now have Councillor Peter Travers from the Little Downham Parish Council. I think you know the rules, sir. It's 5 minutes. You need to turn the microphone on and have a go. Start when you feel comfortable.
I'll do my best. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Peter Travers. I'm a member of the Little Downham Parish Council, and the Parish Council has delegated me to represent it at this meeting to voice its objection to this planning application. On behalf of the parishioners of Little Downham, the Parish Council objects to the proposed development for the following reasons. First, the proposed development, which our local councillor informs us will be larger than most other affordable home developments in the county, is disproportionate to the size of our village. Our parish councillors are aware that there are already numerous social housing properties within the parish that are empty and available. The parish council believes these should be allocated to parishioners in need of homes, and that such an inclusive housing strategy, mixing affordable homes with existing households across the parish, would better serve the social cohesiveness of our community. With paragraph 108B of the National Planning Policy Framework in mind, we ask, how would ECDC ensure this proposal, if approved, would protect the intrinsic character and beauty of our countryside and enhance our natural local environment? How would narrowing the gap between Ely and Little Downham, for example, achieve this? Second reason, the disproportionate size of the proposed development amounts to overdevelopment. It will lead to excessive pressure on local infrastructure and services that are already stretched almost to the limits of safe operation. The Parish Council is aware that education and medical infrastructure serving the parish are already difficult to access and do not have the capacity to support such a large-scale development as that proposed. The same applies to the village water treatment facility, which cannot cope with additional demand from a development of this size. As we've heard, the existing flood risk from foul water to homes nearby the proposed development would be exacerbated by the additional burden this would create. And we ask, how has the applicant demonstrated that water supply and sewage treatment will not be adversely affected by the development? ECDC has committed to ensuring a high quality of life by maintaining and delivering strategic and local infrastructure and facilities needed to support local communities. Our parishioners already suffer flooding, lack of amenities, lack of healthcare, broken roads, to name but a few. The additional pressures from the proposed development would further reduce their quality of life. And we ask, what would ECDC do to ensure the proposed development would have the facilities and infrastructure needed to maintain our parishioners' quality of life, rather than jeopardize it further? 3, our parishioners tell us that the development site is regularly flooded. The parish councillors consider the site to be unsuitable for the proposed development, which, if it were to be approved, would significantly increase the existing flood risk to local catchwater and stormwater drains and ditches. We ask, would ECDC take full responsibility for any future issues if this committee approves this application? And fourthly, the Parish Council is concerned that the addition of about some 80 vehicles from the proposed development to Ely Road traffic will bring significant additional risk. It's clear from informal observation, as we've heard, that significantly more than 50% of vehicles trigger the 30-mile-per-hour warning sign on the Ely-bound carriageway. The revised design of the proposed development places the Ely Road entrance much closer to the junction of Ely Road and Old Fir Close, the recently completed development by the same applicant. The parish council believes that such close proximity, only 33 metres, will create an increased risk of traffic accidents for drivers and pedestrians as vehicles turn into or exit from these junctions from or onto Ely Road, especially during the early morning and evening traffic. And councillors are particularly concerned that the pedestrian activity along Ely Road includes many of heightened vulnerability, such as parents and children walking to and from the local village school, those visiting our village hall, book cafe, the village church and other village amenities. We ask, what would ECDC do to ensure the proposed development would not result in increased numbers of RTAs, injuries and deaths? We appreciate that highways is not your responsibility. Nevertheless, you do carry some responsibility here. With these objections in mind, and given the application is an unnecessary exception site application outside the village plan, the Little Downham Parish Council, on behalf of its local parishioners, urges the planning committee to reject this application. Thank you. I'm sorry I went over my limit.
No, we've had much longer speeches than that one, so can you just stay where you are
Yes,
for a
of course.
minute? Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. How many social housing properties are empty in Little Downham?
I don't have that number to hand, but I'm happy to find it for you.
Because saying there's several or a number
Yeah, I
of
appreciate
is
that.
not.
Yeah. Yeah, but
But are there enough to cover all your
the
needs?
parish council believes there is, yes.
Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. I was going to ask more or less the same question. And is there any reason, do you know, why they are empty?
I don't know the answer to that question, circumstantial perhaps,
Okay.
but
Okay.
again, I don't have a
Is
specific.
there a bus into the village? Do we know about a bus?
There is a
Buses?
bus service into the village, but it's not a regular bus service. It's a sort of on-demand thing, and it runs not every day.
So it's DRT, is it demand responsive? Demand, yes.
It's run by Lords.
Okay. And what's about the size of the village? Well, do you know how many dwellings there are in the village?
It's less than 2,000
2,000 people or 2,000?
dwellings.
Dwellings.
Yes.
That's a big place, isn't it? Yeah. All right. So yes, okay. The water, I mean, you've touched upon the water and the flooding possibility. That is a concern, is it, in this place?
It's a huge concern. Yes,
Yeah.
I mean,
But what happens to the houses further down on the right of that map?
they are in
Down
the area.
Ely Road.
Yeah, I'm sorry. They are in the area of the land that is regularly flooded. Even today, as we speak, there is standing water in this area.
Right. Thank you very much.
Members, any more questions? Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you.
Hello.
You say that there are a number of social houses available to rent, and you also mentioned that you think it is better for social housing to be split up around the village. But my view of Little Downham is that the social housing is in long and larger clumps. It's not sort of a couple of houses here and a couple of houses there. Is that not correct?
I wouldn't argue with that. I'm not aware of the actual layout of the social housing within the village. But what I would say is that the social housing that exists, whether it be in clumps as you describe it, or more generally spread, is within the village boundary, and it's not an exception site outside the boundary, and it's not. And this site is entirely social housing. We, the council, that is, are far more in favour of a socially integrated strategy.
I haven't got any more questions listed here. Any members' questions? No, thank you very much indeed, sir. And we now have the ward councillor, Councillor Anna Bailey. I think you know where everything is, councillor Bailey.
Thank you very much. Long time since I've been to planning committee. It's nice to see everybody. Thank you very much for letting me speak. I've got a number of points that I wanted to make. I did actually carry out a survey back in 2022. It was a general survey, but it had a very specific question about this site. I had a good return rate, and support for this site was mixed. There were slightly more people against it than in favour, but there was also a clear need in the survey reporting about the need for affordable homes, you know, in the parish. And so following that, I took action to pursue the developer, the applicant, who I'm very pleased to say were open-minded about supporting an agreement, a Section 106 agreement, to make sure that they're going to follow a similar allocations policy to those of our local community land trusts, so that people with the strongest ties to the parish get first dibs on the properties, and they've agreed to that, which I'm very, very pleased that they have done. So it will make sure that if this is granted permission, that local people truly benefit first in perpetuity. So I'm pleased about their approach to that. And of course, I welcome affordable housing for the village. I have to agree with the Parish Council view. Councillor Travers voiced it, that I would vastly prefer if this was part of a mixed tenure development. I do feel it's a shame that this didn't come forward as community-led development exception site. I would have preferred to see that. However, that's not what we've got before us. I do note the on-record concerns, as Councillor Akinwale said, about the trees officer not having resolved the issues. Noting what Gavin said from, the officer perspective, but there is clearly outstanding concern from the trees officer. Also of particular concern to local residents, they've been well voiced, is the highways comments, particularly about the design of the access road. And I can just report that this is a real problem. The access, it's virtually a carbon copy of the access into Old Fir Close. The two are very close together. And when I turned into Old Fir Close the other day, it is not possible, even though it says it is in the comments from highways officers, it is not possible for two cars to nicely and easily and safely pass each other. So it means that the person that's trying to turn left into the site is waiting on Ely Road, while the person who's trying to turn right out of the site comes out of the site, and that causes backup. And given that the two accesses are now going to be very close, that is an issue. So I do think the junction design does need very careful looking at, and would ask for that to be done if this is given permission. And I also think there's very careful conditioning needed in relation to the drainage. This is no small matter. There are unresolved significant drainage issues in this location already. And what I would like to see is early delivery of the drainage solution, if this is given permission, that comes forward first, not after the event, because I don't want to be spending my time in the future going to have meetings with angry residents who are very concerned about flooding into their properties. No ward councillor wants to see that. We've got an opportunity to fix it before it happens, and I would like that to be really well conditioned to see that not happening. However, my final point is one that hasn't been raised so far, and you could have been forgiven for having missed it, because I don't know if you've picked up that the fact that this application includes the demolition of the farmhouse, which is on the street frontage. This is a farmhouse that I've known all my life. I grew up in Little Downham. I know it like the back of my hand. And there are policies. Housing 4 policy requires that no significant harm would be caused to the character or setting of the settlement and the surrounding countryside. Our own policy ENV2 requires that layout, form and materials are sympathetic to existing development. And Chapter 12 of the MPPF seeks to secure visually attractive development which improves the overall quality of an area and is sympathetic to local character and history. So I'm surprised to see no argument or justification of the demolition set out in the covering report from officers. The existing property, whilst it's not architecturally significant or important, it's basically Victorian, perhaps early Edwardian, but very attractive nonetheless. Double frontage, substantial property with bay windows. And it is a product of its time, and it is part of the history of the village, and it allows you to read the history of the village. It's entirely capable of renovation and retention. And the omission of discussion about this is in the covering report, to me, is an omission. It is a problem. In my view, the new property, which is, as you might expect, more suited to a cul-de-sac estate environment, is utterly the property that's going to be put in its place.
Councillor Bailey, should I just remind you, there is tolerance here, but you are on the 5 minutes.
Oh, I was watching the green light. Okay, well, I was watching the green light, so. Sorry. So anyway, the new property that is an estate style property and keeping with the other estate properties is utterly incongruous, and it is damaging to the street scene. I'm against demolition of perfectly viable existing housing. It's environmentally and historically damaging. And in this instance, it's absolutely unnecessary. It could be sold on the open market. The justification around, and it has bats in it, and the justification that's given in terms of the bats is that no funding is available to the applicant from Homes England for renovation of properties. And that is, that's perfectly true. But the property could simply be sold on the open market. It does not need to form part of this application. So for me, it's in contravention of HOU 4, ENV 2 and Chapter 12 of the MPPF on that basis. Thank you for your tolerance.
Okay, that's out now. Members, questions from the ward councillor. Councillor Trapp?
Very much. In the demonstration of need that was done by Cambridgeshire Acre, it says there's a very low number of 20 to 34-year-olds in the village. Would you think that having these 1 and 2 bedroom affordable housing increase the number of younger people in the village and allows sort of generational families to be together?
Indeed, Councillor Trapp, and I'm all for, we do need affordable housing in the parish, and there are some 1-bedroom properties and flats in this location, and I'm wholly, I am supportive of that. But looking at the application as a whole, you've heard what I've got to say, and I think the demolished property could be taken out of the application. It doesn't need to be in there, and an application could still be agreed that would provide the very much needed housing for the parish.
Further question. Talking about the design of this site, I'm looking at a map of Witchford. So it's little down. I get anything north of Ely, I get confused. It's all the same up there. Sorry about that.
Down in residents be very cross with you, Councillor Trapp. It's a wonderful village.
But much as you probably regard anything south of Soham as all the same as well, for those who live in the north.
It's a very special village, Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. But I do have noticed the density in certain places there is in excess of what this proposal is. So it looks actually that this one fits in fairly well with.
I mean, I agree with your comments earlier about the design. I think it's been nicely designed, apart from my problem, the very fundamental problem that I have with the street frontage, which is unnecessary and damaging, very damaging.
I mean, I have the same problem about, I think it's damaging to remove a building which is already there, but I can see also the reasons for it. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, Councillor Goodall.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just one question. If the road had to be widened for access and egress, that house is going to be in the way, the one that's there at the moment?
No, the house is set well back from the road, and I think it's perfectly possible to cut what I would call the right angle corners off the junction mouth in order to make access and egress much better.
I'm aware, Councillor Bailey, that different surveys are being done all the time about the sort of the need and the vacant houses and things. So they vary at all. I've been studying this quite a bit in preparation for this, and I've come across figures, and I want you to tell me if this is correct or not, that there's a demand for about 59 to 55 homes, affordable homes in Little Downham.
So that is my understanding from the housing team comments at the time when they were made, which is a few months ago. I know no different to that now. I can just correct the information, well, be more precise about the information earlier, that there are about, well, in the current local plan, there are 802 homes in Little Downham. I suspect that's probably up to about 850 or something like that now. In terms of housing need, you know, it's a snapshot in time, frankly. And I'm aware there's one particular social housing provider in the village, and I'm aware of 2 long-term empty properties that they have.
But we don't know whether or not there's a demand for 50 or what everybody says is a high demand for local people. But I'm trying to pin it down to some rough idea of how many the demand is.
Well, that is, I think, well evidenced, to be fair to the applicant, by the housing team here at the District Council, who have confirmed, you know, the housing need, with people citing Little Downham as their preferred location, is basically my understanding of how that is shown. So it's the 55 or 59 or whatever it was, that was a snapshot in time when that information was given. That is some months ago, but I can't imagine that there haven't been great swathes of new housing coming forward in Little Downham in the meantime, and whether those people have gone elsewhere, I don't know.
So 39 houses would be a help towards that figure. And I understand you saying that you'd had discussions with the applicant, and there was an agreement has been made that you would, the same allocations policy would be used as the CLT schemes.
Yeah, they've agreed to adopt on the affordable rental properties this same allocations points-based system, which will ensure that people with the very strongest ties to the village and the parish benefit first, which I am really pleased about. That, you know, that really matters.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions for Councillor Bailey? No, thank you very much
Thank you,
indeed.
committee.
Now have comments from the officer.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So obviously I've made some notes during all of those representations, so I'll attempt to address those now. If there's any that I've missed or misinterpreted, obviously, please do let me know. So I think sort of starting from the initials, really, I think the concern regarding drainage on the site, as I say, the status of that land is identified on the EA mapping as being low flood risk, flood zone 1, with low surface water flood risk. The site does slope down and obviously gets lower down towards the south of the site, which is quite correct. The lead local flood authority have obviously been consulted with the application and are happy with the drainage strategy. Included within that drainage strategy were indicative site levels. Obviously, there's an acknowledgement that levels of properties would need to be sort of raised a bit, but that's yet to be agreed. Condition 11 seeks to secure the absolute detail on levels. And that would be sort of in conjunction with condition 3, which asks for that final drainage strategy design. But on the face of it, in terms of the consultee comments that we've got from the lead local flood authority, the statutory bodies, is that the site won't suffer from flood risk and won't increase flood risk elsewhere. That's essentially their assessment when it comes to these applications. I think, in addition, noting obviously concerns or existing concerns over foul networks. Obviously, they're an existing problem. It's not incumbent on new development to resolve existing problems, but nonetheless, I've got no objection from Anglian Water that there isn't sufficient capacity. So again, from a technical ground, it'd be very difficult, in my opinion, to object to a scheme when there's no technical basis for doing so. That's not to say that local knowledge is not important, but nonetheless, obviously, in terms of defending a refusal on those grounds, I would consider that would be quite difficult because there are no technical experts that have come forward to object on those grounds. In terms of highways, I take the point about concerns over the access safety obviously we consulted local highways authority on numerous occasions through this application. Page 4 of the agenda sets out their sort of at the bottom there sets out their comments, which essentially is that they've got no objections on highway safety grounds. They've explicitly set that out. I appreciate it sounds as though there's been some background discussion with local highways authority, but when we look at what's reasonable to expect and ask for when we talk about safety measures and things like that, obviously we should be doing that through either obligations or conditions, and the NPPF is quite clear in that we should only be securing those things where they're necessary and reasonable and related. Obviously, with no objection from local highway authority, given they are the people that would be looking to secure these, then it would seem that it's not reasonable to ask for these things and therefore wouldn't meet the test. In terms of the access arrangements, obviously that would be agreed through the Section 278 works with the local highways authority because it works to the highway. So the final detail of that access would be agreed with local highways authority. If they're mindful there are concerns, as it sounds as though they are, then one would expect them to build those concerns into the final access design when that is dealt with within the highway. However, I say at this time, I've got nothing in front of me that suggests that there is, for this application site, will create a severe highway issue. The NPPF again is clear that applications should not be refused on highways grounds unless there are severe issues on that basis. So just going to the tree impacts, which obviously a number of the representations have mentioned. So yes, so there is what I guess you could class as an unresolved. I'm just going to quickly go to the plan that shows where the trees are. So the tree that we are talking about is this tree here in particular, which we looked at on the site visit today. It's a horse chestnut tree. It's a protected tree under a TPO. The tree officers raised concerns about the pressure that may be placed under this tree, given where it sits relative to some back gardens there. And as I say, the applicant has put forward a proposal, and you can just see an access track that goes to it so they can maintain it as part of their management arrangement for the wider site. So section 7.713 of the officer report on page 39 does refer to this and does consider it. I think, quite frankly, the tree officer hasn't agreed the approach and considers that risk to the tree in its longer term is still a possibility. We obviously have to balance that with obviously the wider site and the benefits that brings forward in terms of, what would the implications be if we were to refuse the application on grounds that the tree may come under threat in the future when there appears to be a feasible maintenance strategy for that. So officers don't feel comfortable that in its own right would form a robust refusal reason, particularly when balanced against the wider benefits of the scheme, which obviously would meet an identified housing need. So I think just in reference to sort of some of the visual impacts of the scheme, I think the Parish Council made reference to sort of ensuring that the development would protect the countryside. I think as referred to in the report, it's a rural exception site by virtue of the policy. It allows for development in the countryside for affordable housing. Obviously, it's necessary to ensure that impact is not significant on the countryside. Just looking at the site location relative to the built form, obviously it's straddled on either side by continuous development, and therefore it's not considered to be a development that would completely intrude into the open countryside there. More of a continuation of built form that you experienced along Ely Road. So it's not significant in the officer's opinion, which is the test of that policy. In terms of protecting the countryside, there's a proposal to put a landscape buffer around the edge of it, which should reduce its sort of hard urban edge on that countryside, but nonetheless, the policy implies that there is an acceptance for rural development to go ahead in this countryside. And obviously the benefits of that in terms of it being affordable housing, is where that policy comes from in terms of accepting the principle of that in the first instance. In terms of the dwelling at the front there, I think it's I think it can be agreed that it's regrettable that dwelling is proposed to be demolished to accommodate this development. As set out in the report, unfortunately, the way that the affordable housing arrangement works in terms of grant funding, refurbishment of that dwelling is not possible. And we have to really balance the disbenefits of losing that dwelling with the wider benefits of that scheme. I take the point that maybe it doesn't need to be used as part of the scheme and could be sold on the open market, but that's not what's in front of us today. So therefore, it is for us to assess the benefits of the scheme against some of those disbenefits, and there always are disbenefits with most applications, but it's a balancing exercise to be struck nonetheless. I think in terms of sort of some of the concerns raised about pedestrian safety, as I sort of pointed out at the start of the scheme, and I'll just perhaps go to another plan, the proposal is to upgrade the footpath that leads directly from the access of the site to Old Fir Close. And within Old Fir Close, you can see that photograph there. This actually spills out onto Cannon Street, which is a continuous pedestrian route out to the north of the site. So that would direct pedestrians safely to the northern part of the site, northern part of the settlement along Cannon Street, where I think there's perhaps bus stops, etc., and obviously other services and facilities. So it's considered that there's sort of adequate arrangements for pedestrians. Notwithstanding that, within the site there is a continuous footpath proposed also. So on-site safety as well as off-site for pedestrians is accommodated. And again, there's been no objection raised by Highways on that basis. So I think, essentially the application is identified quite clearly, and I think it seems to be agreed from a lot of representatives that there is a need for affordable homes in the area. I take on board the comment that there may be some properties available presently for accommodation, but we're looking at needs of around 55 to 59 households. I'm not certain there's going to be that many dwellings available at present. There doesn't seem to be any numbers available on that basis. And that information was provided in October last year, so I'd consider the information we got from the housing team to be quite fresh and sort of still relevant to this day, particularly given that the only way to deliver affordable housing is either through major schemes and or rural exception sites. I'm not aware there are any significant major schemes coming forward in Little Downham that would achieve anywhere near the quantum of affordable housing that seems to be needed at this time. So again, that needs to be balanced. And I think in terms of sort of the design of the dwellings, they are relating more to the Old Fir Close scheme. And therefore that nature, that design and appearance of development does already exist in the area. So in terms of the requirement to accord with the character of the area, I don't consider it wholly departs from the character of the area in that regard. If there's anything else I've missed, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive information session. Members, we now have the opportunity. Councillor Ackland first.
Thank you, Chair. And it's in regards to the condition 7.8.2 in regards to the play area. It doesn't specify inclusive in that statement. Could you include that in the condition, please?
So I'm just trying to find the condition. I think the open spaces scheme is generally secured through the Section 106 agreement in terms of that final scheme and how we secure that, as well as obviously that contribution towards off-site play space as well. I'm just checking the condition. No. Well, it's in the 106. Yeah, so apologies through you, Chair. Andrew in legal has just advised that will be built into the section 106 in terms of agreeing a scheme. Obviously, we do try and secure inclusive play equipment as standard in any case, but we can ensure that that's noted in there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Huffer.
Thank you, Chair. Should we decide to give permission on this basic application today, if the applicant came back in with an amendment and took out the two front dwellings that replace the old dwelling at the front that goes along the street, the one with the bats in, could that come forward as an amendment if he could be appealed to retain that building and take those two properties out and leave the one old building in? Could he could that be an amendment, or would he have to have a whole new application?
Yes, I think we possibly could. I'm just looking at the description of development, which quotes the quantum, I think. It's going down. But it's a reduction, so I think that could possibly be.
So it'd be a question of appealing to the developer to say, would they mind losing those two and keeping one? So effectively, they're only one down. Because it would retain the street scene coming into Little Downham.
Yeah, I think we just need to be clear that obviously we're here to determine what's in front of us
Absolutely, yes.
today.
So
But
question
I take your point. It could reasonably, yes, we could
yeah.
secure that through a section 73
Yeah.
application.
Thank you.
Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. Councillor Huffer had very much the same question as I had, but I have a number of other questions. Of course. One thing is, I'm looking at the open street map. Probably something which you think is so inferior, but it does say that drain to which one could put the thing is actually existing on the side of this site. So why can't it be drained straight into it rather than having to cross the road?
So my understanding is that the capacity of that drain isn't quite known. My understanding is that there may already be existing issues with that drain. So therefore the intention is to attenuate on site, which is the most sustainable means, and then directly discharge any extra over directly into an IDB drain.
Yes,
rather than rely on an existing drain that is probably unknown at this time in terms of its capacities and performance.
But if I understand from your map, it seems to be going into the same drain, but going across a couple of roads or one road.
That I'm not sure of, and it's not mapped in any of the drainage strategy work as far as I'm aware.
Right, okay. Probably I'm using very amateur stuff here, open street map. That's one thing. The demolition has already been. I'm talking about the path. Is there a possibility of the back end of that development where the houses, I can't see these houses, plot 36 and plot 35, I think, having a path from there into old Fir Close?
Now, my understanding is a drain separating the two developments.
One could put a bridge over that. It seems very, having an access path through there rather than on the main road might be quite good, actually. But it's the same developer, so it may.
I mean, again, we're not here to negotiate the scheme, but at the same time, I'm not quite sure how that would work in terms of the existing property that's on that boundary and what land is in its ownership. I mean.
All right, and there's no I don't see any plans for planting any trees on this site. Will there be trees, do you think, planted around the attenuation pond or on green or something?
Yeah, so the proposal is for a landscape ecological management plan, and sort of obviously boundary treatments, etc. So we would expect that to sort of come forward as part of a sort of a wider scheme. There is a soft landscaping scheme that's submitted that shows obviously hedgerows and trees within the green space. again, the green space is yet to be agreed in terms of that open space area. But yeah, obviously the landscape ecological management plan would sort of show how the soft landscaping that's put in is then going to be managed in the longer term, and that's not only from an aesthetic point of view, but obviously from a biodiversity point of view, and some of those protected, well, the bats and things like that.
And one very small point on page 23, the bottom table, the early years contribution seems to be completely AWOL.
Yes, I would agree. That was the county council's comments
It's either
back in.
69, 76, 40,
Yeah,
or 79, 11.
I think whether how that's come through, I'm not entirely sure, but obviously that comment 6th of October has been superseded somewhat by theirs of the 13th of December, which is the one that we've obviously referred to moving forward. So yes, quite right. That's already been pointed out to me, Councillor Trapp. You're beaten to it, I'm afraid.
Oh, I'm sorry about it. God, not a first. Anyway, but may I be the first to say how much I've appreciated your work here and your presentations, and I'm very sorry that we're going to lose you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Colbert.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm thinking along, or I have been finding myself thinking along the same lines as Councillor Huffer. First, please, do you have an elevation that you can show us of the mouth of the new estate so that we can see what this replacement building looks like? No, the one that's to be, the one that's to be put there in its stead. Because I do quite like the old building myself. You've got an elevation.
I'm afraid I've not got one loaded on the PowerPoint, so it's very this is sort of loaded in. I'm afraid I can't sort of depart from it. It would have been obviously online on the public access to you, so I'm afraid I don't have one.
2 days ago.
Yeah,
so
I know.
I've had a chance to catch up with it.
I can have a quick look through the file to see if I've got one.
Well, well, because I am sympathetic to the idea of retaining the existing building. I don't quite understand how one could overcome this, or indeed what would one do with the bats that are residing in the attic. But
go.
they could stay. Well, I'm not sure I'd want bats in my belfry if I were living in it. There's plenty of them.
Sorry, through you, Chair, I've not been able to find a sort of a plan of that frontage. Obviously, it's sort of that particular property sort of, I guess, turns a corner in that it's got to present onto the access as it comes in, but also onto the street seams, the frontage there. That's really all the information I can give you at this time. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but obviously we've just got to. I say we've got to sort of really assess the application as it stands today, but I note your concerns. Yeah.
Councillor Colbert, you've asked a question, and have you had sufficient of an answer?
Well, I thank the officer for the answer. I just regard it as unfortunate because I would have liked to have seen something that was at least more sympathetic to the existing street scene, but as the officer says, this is what we've got before us, and unless it's possible to do a renegotiation, which I doubt, I presume we have to judge on what we have before us today.
That's very much where the situation is.
Thank you.
And Councillor Whelan.
I'll ask the question again about the parking. So how many spaces are going to be allocated to each property? And will that cause a problem? I mean, I've noted that there's probably 10 visitor spaces allocated on there. I'm just concerned, obviously, the whole layout of the road and where, if there was additional parking needed, where that would be, because knowing how people get upset when they park in front of people's driveways, and just generally, what's the allocation of parking for each property?
Yeah, so through you, Chair. So policy COM8 of the adopted local plan sets out sort of expected parking standards, and basically sets out that in generally dwellings in what they class as other locations, which are outside of town centres, should achieve 2 spaces per dwelling, which is average per development. And then in terms of public and visitor cars, it says up to 1 car space per 4 units. So that's up to, which kind of implies that you could under provide, but nonetheless, this provides 10, which is 10% of let's say 40. So it appears to be compliant in that regard. And then obviously cycle spaces as well. And there's a condition requiring cycle storage there. So 2 parking spaces per dwelling is sort of on average what it asks for, which the scheme, but where the scheme achieves more than 2 bedrooms, or 2 bedrooms or more, I should say, more than 1 bedroom, they achieve 2 parking spaces on site. There are some 1-bedroom flats that I believe achieve 1 parking space per flat, being that they're 1 bedrooms is not considered to be unreasonable. So in my opinion, it appears to comply with sort of COM8 and what it aims to achieve in that regard. Thank you.
I was going to ask the same question, and all I think that both of us would want is just a figure to say, are there going to be 10 visitor parking spaces, and are they going to the north of the open green space which is marked and you've highlighted?
Well, the requirement is to deliver this scheme in accordance with the plan, and obviously there is 10 visitor spaces shown at present. In terms of the surfacing of that, that's still to be agreed through a condition, but the actual arrangement of and configuration of that road is as expected. So 10 parking spaces.
There's 10
for visitors.
Spaces.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was my concern as well. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. The scheme gives a play area for young children, and then a contribution for play for older children as a financial contribution. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct. Yeah.
Whereabouts is this older play area in Little Downham? I mean, I don't know Little Downham very well, but
So I've marked it in the yellow circle on the plan on the projector there. So that is a recreation ground that Little Downham operate. And on there is a mugger, multi-use games area. There's a pavilion building and some play equipment there. My understanding is the pavilion building is earmarked for potential upgrades, etc. So the contribution could go towards that, which obviously could assist sort of youth play. But alternatively, obviously, there are probably many projects that are identified for that recreation area for upgrades. So the idea is that obviously the green space that's provided with this site is not really significant enough for youth space in terms of you're not really going to get much meaningful on it. So therefore, it seems more reasonable to put that money into existing infrastructure and upgrade that for the benefit of the younger people of Little Downham.
okay, thanks.
Councillor Trapp.
Sorry, coming back again. It's about EV charging. It's a question I really should have asked, I suppose, the developer. It's about, would the flats be having their own EV charging points rather than communal ones? Because it is much cheaper to actually have one's own electricity rather than rely on a commercial provider.
My understanding is that EV charging points now falls under building regulations in terms of controlling that as a requirement under part, I forget what the part is. I'm not a building regs aficionado, so but real building regs essentially require EV charging now as standard within residential units, is my understanding, or at least the connection for that.
They must be connected to the actual property.
Yeah,
And
you have to
control.
you have to be able to install an EV charging point to properties now, so it has all the infrastructure ready for that.
I see nods from the.
Well, members, you've had the opportunity to question the officer, and we're now getting on to the debate. So away you go. Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Early in the debate to suggest that I would like to propose that we accept the officer recommendation. I mean, I really feel that this will mature into a very attractive site if approved, and you know, it will be a nice airy feeling, I think. Obviously, we have identified today some niggles, shall I say, but I wouldn't have thought that these are not anything that couldn't be overcome following a little bit of discussion and whatnot. So I would certainly be happy to propose that we accept the officer recommendation.
Okay, well, we'll make a note of that, and we'll now carry on with the debate. Away you go.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank everybody for the presentation. I think the site is suitable for a build. I do have concerns about the drainage like everyone else, but if the construction company can deal with that, then there shouldn't be a problem. And I'm quite happy to second this to go through.
Okay, so we'll make a note of that. And more member debate. Councillor
Well,
Hudson.
I'm going to be the naysayer. I've never heard anything sensible from Cambridgeshire County Highways, and I've never heard anything sensible from Anglian Water. So frankly, I have great scepticism on anything that they do or do not object to. I have serious concerns about street scene approaching by demolishing that sort of fairly unique Little Downham house or cottage as you're coming into the village. I have enormous concerns about the relocation of the bat maternity roost. I'm concerned about the potential flooding. I'm concerned about the probably overdevelopment of the site. I would struggle to support this in its current form. I would like to see the existing house at the front retained. They would only be losing one dwelling. I think it would also offer security for the tree that has the tree preservation order, because the roots would not be disturbed in construction of yet another dwelling in the back garden of the existing cottage. So I would like to see this plan amended. I'm quite happy to support affordable housing in this area, but I think one house down isn't going to be the end of the world. I appreciate the bats are going to have to be relocated at some point, whether it's market housing or whether this house is refurbished in some way, but to demolish it when it's a charming cottage and somebody would love to renovate it. If the current developer doesn't want to do that, then I'm sure they would sell it on the open market easily, because it would make somebody a charming residence. But I feel very unhappy about the alteration of the street scene going into Little Downham. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've got a good scheme here, and we've got affordable housing, which we desperately need in East Cambridgeshire. We can't possibly say, well, you know, there's one house which apparently has been empty for about 15 years. And, you know, presumably, if it was capable to be easily restored, probably wouldn't have been empty all that length of time. And for someone to buy a house in the open market with bats in the loft, I think that would be a big disadvantage for most people. They wouldn't want to do it. So I think we've got a good scheme in front of us here. We've got a number of affordable housing and some shared ownership, which will stay as shared ownership. So we've got real advantage to the village, and I think we ought to be approving it. No scheme is going to be perfect, and you know that's always the case. But if the drainage is a problem, but we're told by the authorities that it isn't, and if the highways people say there isn't a highways problem, we can't object on those grounds, and because you know any inspector would immediately accept the officer, the expert's view rather than the planning committee's view on a technical thing. So I think we're lucky to have a good scheme in front of us, and hope that these ones won't stay empty like some of the things we've been, as a council, have been worrying about from Sanctuary, who seem to be not capable of necessarily keeping all their houses full of tenants.
Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. I was very impressed by the presenter, the developer, about this and the way that they were going to manage it, and also by the design itself. And I think this is the kind of development we do need. However, I do think there's a significant problem with the drainage and with the backing up of sewage. And I think those things, I don't know if we can secure them with an S106 condition, that they have to be solved. I'm looking to the...
I can come in there if you want. There is a statutory responsibility for the sewage undertaker to effectively, before the houses are occupied, ensure that they are connected and that it works. It's not something that we can control through the planning system. So there is an obligation upon Anglian Water to do that. Now, as my colleague said earlier, there may be local issues at the moment, but what we can't do is we can't resolve those through a planning application for new homes, because Anglian Water have said that there is capacity within the network, and as they are the statutory undertaker who has to provide that sewerage function, it is incumbent on them to ensure that it works. It's not something that we can control through 106 or condition. It would be a Grampian condition, and we couldn't do that.
Thank you. And presumably they can then be sued if it doesn't work, if what they say is actually untrue.
I really wouldn't want to comment on that personally. Thank you.
All right. So, and the other thing is, like Councillor Huffer, I am concerned about the demolition of that, not because I think it's actually not a cottage, it's a farmhouse. It's you know, it's not a little thing with roses around it, and so it is actually, you know, a very typical farmhouse in this neighborhood, and even down south, beyond, you know, south of Ely. It looks like that as well. The Fordham places like that, I believe, things like that exist. But I think also not because of that. But I think it's just demolishing a house is using up a lot of energy, a lot of carbon content is wasted, and it's a pity that we cannot. We have to vote on this particular proposal. It may be possible that that house is sold separately with the garden behind it. Will make a very attractive family house, without really detriment to the rest of the site, which I think is absolutely ideal, and that, you know, that I'd really recommend. So, and the conditions that the housing association will be putting on future on the occupants about perpetuity of affordable housing, I think it's really remarkable. Why, Councillor Colbert, why are you waving your hand at me?
Councillor Trapp, could we have some
I've stopped.
Quietness, maybe.
Quietness.
Well, now, any more member comments in a debate? No? Councillor Huffer.
I absolutely appreciate we can't refuse this just on the grounds of Anglian Water, but I can think of at least 2 estates in Fordham where after the houses have been occupied and completed, 3 years on, still have not been adopted by Anglian Water, and they have enormous sewage problems. So I get that they will say there is capacity in the system. There's capacity in the system because they never get round to adopting them. I mean, it's woeful, Bill. It's absolutely woeful. And they are not the only developer. It's happening everywhere. And we need to hold these statutory authorities to account. And we seem to be, our hands seem to be completely tied because they write in every time, no objection, there's capacity. Highways, no issues, there's not a problem. But we grant this and then the problems start. And it's the ward members that get dragged into battles with these statutory authorities who frankly aren't doing their job.
Asking the planning manager, is there any way we can safeguard or make some protection that would satisfy Councillor Huff?
The short answer is no. The longer answer is, as a council, we can obviously enter into communications and correspondence with the statutory undertakers to put pressure to ensure they do provide as appropriate. But as far as the planning system goes, there is very little that we can do.
You understand the dilemma that exists?
I completely understand, but I mean, I do think that somebody needs to make a stand, and we need to get these people in front of us as an authority and say, what are you doing? Why is this continually happening? And it's not just isolated incidents in Fordham. I'm sure every single member here has had complaints from residents about foul water sewage backing up, all kinds of issues that Anglian Water, for whatever reason, simply aren't dealing with. And I don't know how it happens or what we do, but we kind of need to get them in front of us at a planning committee. You know, they send in a report, they never send anybody to sit here in front of us, ever, nor do highways. We have to drag them here kicking and screaming. And it's really unacceptable just to say, no objections, we have capacity, time after time after time, when we know that there are issues. As an authority, we know there are, as councillors, we know there are issues in our wards.
Councillor Colbert.
I'm agreeing with Councillor Huffer again. I think she makes a very good point, because whilst Anglian Water may be telling us that there is capacity for this development, has it fully considered the existing housing? Because what we don't want to do is to approve an application which adequately serves the houses in it, but has a detrimental effect upon nearby housing. Thank you.
As I understand it, we are assured that you are comfortable with the drainage and the water facilities.
Well, I'm not the expert in drainage, but certainly the LFA and Anglian Water have come back with no concerns, subject to detailed design. I would suggest if there are sort of wider concerns about how these statutory undertakers operate, that does need to be discussed, but I'm not sure the planning committee is the forum to do that.
Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Well, representing Littleport, we are having hundreds of houses built. So if we tried to hold Anglian Water, etc., to account, none of those would have happened, would they? And, you know, there's sort of 30 or 40 families here which won't possibly have a house if we, or home, if we decide to turn this down.
Basically, members, we have a recommendation from the officers to approve this. We have two councillors, one who's proposed it for acceptance and one who's seconding that. We have, I believe, an agreement, which will be in the section 106, that the resident or the application of these houses will be as the same as the CLT. Therefore, there will be provable local connections as a priority, so that the people, and I'm given the figures of, there's a demand for, I agree it's floating, but in the top 50s of people in Little Downham who need a home, and this is 39 houses that are going to be built, and they're all affordable. and 77% of them are going to be rented. So I've got to do the same as you have, and I've got to decide whether we accept what's in front of us, or, you know, with the allocation policy as discussed, or say no. So I don't think there's anything else that we can do except to go to the vote with the proposal that Councillor Ambrose Smith proposed, which is, as I understand it, to be accept the officer's recommendation and some mention to be made of the allocation policy being the same as the CLT. Is that right, Amber, Christine Amber, is that right, Councillor? So I think we go to the vote and we say, will those in favour please raise their hand? Will those against please raise their hand? Are there any abstentions? So what is the result here? 6?
Yeah, motion is passed with 6 votes for, 2 votes against and 2 abstentions.
Okay, so that is now approved. And thank you very much for the long and perhaps, well, the long amount of time you've been here, and I appreciate the people who've arrived and spoken. I think since we were going to go for 2 hours for a comfort break, I think we'll have a very short comfort break till 4 o'clock and starting now. Those people who wish to go, please feel free to leave, and those people who wish to stay, please stay. That's it. Okay, we've now moved on to item number 6. And the case officer is going to start with a report. Away you go.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, agenda item 6, reserve matters application for 41 residential dwellings with matters of appearance, layout, scale and landscaping committed on this scheme. So the site is located to the southwest of Sutton, access via Garden Close, which is an estate of predominantly single-storey dwellings. Station Road lies to the north and northeast on the plan there. Recreation ground is directly south of the site. There's dense pockets of trees in the centre, as you can see from the aerial, which are TPO'd. Obviously, a hedgerow throughout the site. There's a sort of existing network of ponds towards the southeast corner, being the lowest part of the site. And the site is about 3.17 hectares in land. So just in terms of background outline, planning permission was approved back in January 22 for a scheme for up to 53 dwellings with essentially those basic sort of parameters built in, access via Garden Close, a locally equipped area of play within the site, nature reserve to that southeast corner, and a landscape ecological management plan secured through a Section 106 agreement. Last year in April, a reserve matters application was refused for the site for 47 dwellings, with the reasons being a lack of single-storey dwellings, the housing mix not according with latest evidence, and that the development would have an adverse impact upon living conditions of occupiers of 10 Oaks Lane who reside at the northwest corner of the site, owing to the acoustic fence, which results in poor outlook and harm to amenity. So we have a duty under the Public Sector Equality Act to ensure that we have due regard to the need to eliminate discrimination, harassment, victimisation, advance equality opportunity between persons who share relevant protected characteristic and persons who do not share it, and foster good relations between persons who share relevant protected characteristic and those who do not. So there is an occupier of the aforementioned site at 10 Oaks Lane that has a protected characteristic, and therefore the Public Sector Equality Duty Act is fully engaged. And the Act explains that having due regard involves removing or minimising disadvantages suffered by people due to their protected characteristics, taking steps to meet the needs of people from protected groups where they're different from the needs of other people, and encouraging people from protected groups to participate in public life or in other activities where their participation is disproportionately low. So just a quick run through the slides in terms of photos. So as you'll remember from the site visit this morning, this is Garden Close leading up to the actual site. So this is where the access is proposed to be. Photographs looking north, top right, and looking south, bottom left. Bottom right, sorry. This is a photograph taken from the recreation ground beyond the site to the south. You can see the church, St Andrews there in the background, and obviously that dense belt of trees that separates the recreation ground and the application site. And there's some sort of shots from within the site, looking back at the access point. Bottom left is 10 Oaks Lane, which shows the proximity of that site and the boundary treatment arrangement relative to the application site. And again, those photos to the right show the church in the background, so views north. And then across at the bottom right is of the cricket pavilion area. So you can see the sites comprises sort of various areas of trees. That's the TPO grouping on the top corner there. The ponds, as mentioned, down at the southeast corner, and obviously the belts of hedgerow that run and divide up the site in various arrangements. This is Lawn Lane and Garden Close, as you can see, single story, sort of very much the character of that estate area there. So the main considerations are principal, housing mix, layout, scale appearance, biodiversity, residential amenity, flood risk and drainage, that historic environment with particular regard to protecting obviously that church, and energy and sustainability. Obviously, given the application was with us last April under different reserve matters and was refused on housing mix general scale and residential amenity, they ought to be the area of focus. But nonetheless, I'll just very briefly take you through those other considerations, given that we've got new members of the committee with us. So the application is allocated through the neighbourhood plan. Policy MP5 identifies it and allocates it for up to 53 dwellings, sets out 3 basic criteria in that it should be predominantly low density single-storey dwellings, should retain existing trees and hedgerows, and should preserve and enhance views from the south to the church, Lawn Lane, as we saw earlier, and Station Road across the cricket fields and open spaces. So the previous reserve matters application was refused in terms of housing mix on the grounds that it didn't accord with Sutton Parish Council's latest housing needs assessment they've undertaken, which was to support their replacement neighbourhood plan, which is sort of emerging. So as you can see, there is a difference in terms of the mix of housing. Whilst it had a predominance of two-bedroom homes, there were also 4-bedroom properties and no one-bedders or 5+, whereas the AECOM housing needs assessment identified there should be a requirement for 1-bedroom and 5+ bedroom homes as well, and a nil provision of 4-bedroom homes. So on that basis, the council felt that it didn't align with the latest housing needs evidence and therefore was not compliant with policy HOW 1 of the local plan or MP7 of the Sutton plan, which requires that housing should accord with the sort of latest evidence and certainly contribute towards achieving that. So the latest application proposes a slightly different mix in terms of 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, and 4-bedroom, but still very much a focus on those types. So again, no 5+ bedrooms and no 1+ bedroom homes. In terms of the status of the housing needs assessment, that has recently sort of gone through consultation with the neighbourhood plan. So sort of gathered weight in terms of sort of where it currently is, and it's considered that that housing needs assessment, different to last time, can be given moderate weight, whereas last time we weren't quite sure of its status because it still had consultation to run through. However, the emerging housing mix policy is yet to be examined by experts, so we can give that very limited weight. Nonetheless, the policies do require that housing mix is delivered in accordance with latest evidence, which, as the report sets out, there is some conflict with that, albeit there is a focus for 2-bedroom homes and obviously some 3-bedroom properties as well. So members are to consider the weight afforded to the housing needs assessment and balance this against the particular circumstances of this scheme, including the constraints and the benefits of achieving a larger number of 2-bedroom single-storey dwellings. There is a greater number of single-storey properties than before, all of which will be M42 compliant. And obviously the scheme therefore does positively contribute towards small homes, which is one of the main requirements of policy MP7, as well as a compliant level of affordable housing. So the mix is different to what we had before, albeit it still doesn't meet the full range of housing mix that is currently required under that housing needs assessment. So there is partial conflict with those same policies. As set out in the report, the requirements of the allocation policy MP5 does place, in the officer's opinion, constraints on the deliverability of larger 5+ bedroom homes and 1-bedroom properties, with the latter typically being flats or at least 2-storey maisonettes, and the 5-bedroom homes potentially being even taller when the sort of main ethos is to achieve a lower scale and less impactful development in this fringe site. And that is obviously to be considered in the general planning balance. In terms of layout, the access and connectivity is all agreed, and to be honest, last time the application, there were no concerns raised in terms of the general layout. Obviously, the density has been reduced as a result of more bungalows going in on the site, which take up larger land take and obviously less dwellings. So it's now down to 13 dwellings per hectare, whereas it was 15 previously. But the locally equipped area of play is still in the same location, and essentially the main parameters that were considered last time round remain the same in that regard, and no concerns are raised in that respect. In terms of scale, appearance and landscaping, so last time, in April last year, the application was refused on the basis that it didn't comprise predominantly single-storey dwellings as required under policy MP5. However, this application has increased its percentage of single-storey dwellings by 11%. So it was 55% single-storey dwellings. It's now 66%. The two-storey dwellings are still proposed to be mainly centralised in that area of the land, shown blue on the plan. The pink colour are the single-storey dwellings. Ridge heights are maximum 7.7 as previously proposed. And it's sort of therefore considered that predominantly is not defined, but 66%, 2/3 of the site being bungalows, officers consider would imply that it is the predominance of bungalows, particularly when considering the character of that site, which places those single-storey dwellings around the fringe of the site. So policy MP5 also requires preservation of views of the church. This wasn't previously raised as a concern either, and the plan shows that there are still the avenues in the layout which achieve continuous views of the church, notwithstanding that if you sort of move southwards to that recreation ground, you can still see the church as you would have seen, and the development would actually be screened by that belt of trees to the south. The dwellings themselves, no concerns were raised last time round about the designs of those dwellings, and they still are retained as the same this time round. So therefore, it's considered that the general appearance of those dwellings is appropriate in the context of the site. There are some trees proposed to be removed from the site, but there are a large number of trees to be replanted, which is compliant with the SPD. The landscape plan actually sort of exceeds really what the SPD would otherwise require, and the hedgerow is retained, so it's considered in that regard that there are no concerns. Again, the local ecological management plan is required to be updated just to align with some of the outcomes from the quality impact assessment in terms of sort of gating areas, including benches around some of those pockets of open space. But nonetheless, it was previously, there were no objections raised previously to previous iterations of this, and it's considered that an appropriate length could be secured along with the woodland and hedgerow management plan also being proposed and secured through condition. So the final reason for refusal in the last application centred around, as I said, the amenity of the occupiers of 10 Oaks Lane. In general, the wider development doesn't raise concerns for residential amenity, so future occupiers are presented with sort of an afforded adequate separation distance and space, and there are no concerns about existing residents along garden close to which it sort of backs onto. So the main consideration, therefore, is the impact on the family, the occupiers of 10 Oaks Lane. Previous applications, as mentioned, was refused on the basis that the acoustic fence was sited in a position that resulted in poor outlook for those residents, and therefore failed to protect their amenity, noting that one had a protected characteristic, and therefore would fail to comply with policy ENV2 and the Equality Act. So the plan you see in front of you there shows the red line, which was the previously proposed position of that acoustic fence. As you can see, it's been moved to seek to address the concerns. So therefore, you're looking at around about 1 metre southwards for the acoustic fence, and around 2 to 3 metres eastwards. So it's around about 11 metres now from the boundary of 10 Oaks Lane. So officers are satisfied that, having regard to the sort of repositioning of the fence, that it wouldn't amount to significant harm to outlook, and that the suitable landscape scheme is secured, including defensive planting to sort of dissuade people from maybe climbing over that fence. In respect of the position of existing bungalows relative to it, they're considered to be separated sufficiently away from that boundary so as not to result in significant amenity harm. And obviously, given their single-storey nature, they wouldn't be able to achieve any overlooking. There is a proposal to put a stop-proof fence in, which is shown in green on that plan you may just be able to see, which separates what is a inaccessible area to the public, a biodiversity area from the main development. This is considered to be an appropriate means of securing that site off, whilst also achieving surveillance by some of those properties there. There is a condition proposed for long-term management of that fence, and a scheme, as I say, for defensive planting. In terms of sort of the risk of noise and disruption, it's considered that it would be low. It's proposed to be a low traffic area, serving only 4 dwellings. Each of those dwellings has a driveway. Some of those driveways are further set back than the actual dwellings themselves. The police have considered the risks of ASB to this proposed arrangement and have not raised any objections on that basis. So it's considered that the relocation of the acoustic fence is acceptable in this instance. So this slide just shows you some of the levels between the existing property at 10 Oaks Lane and the proposed bungalows, and also shows the position of the acoustic fence and the existing boundary treatments at 10 Oaks Lane as well. And there are lines shown that shows that views into the garden area won't be achievable either through the levels or through the position of the boundary treatments. An alternative proposal was put forward by the occupiers of 10 Oaks Lane for an alternative position for that acoustic fence, which they considered would reduce the overbearing nature of it. It would restrict the ability for people to park on the landscaped area southwest, thereby being able to overhear or create noise, which may disrupt the occupier of 10 Oaks Lane. And it acts as a deterrent for people to climb and potentially cause ASB. Cambs Police were consulted on this as they were the last time round and have responded. They consider that it may actually create a greater risk of ASB in terms of if anyone climbs over that fence, then they would not have eyes on them at all, and views would be cut off, essentially relying therefore on the occupiers of number 12 and number 10 Oaks Lane to sort of see what's going on in that area. So it reduces surveillance for new residents. The ASB officer has concurred with that advice from the police during my discussions with them. The Council's Environment Health team have advised that in terms of moving the position of that acoustic fence, they don't consider it results in a discernible difference to its noise mitigation. Just in terms of flood risk and drainage, the outline permission secures a drainage strategy. The LFA are happy with that strategy in principle, subject to concluding matters through those conditions under the outline. There were no concerns raised by the Anglian Water or Flood Authority on the scheme last time round, and that didn't form any reason for refusal. And this position is the same this time round. Likewise, in terms of the historic environment, archaeology is secured through condition, and it's considered, as was previously, that this scheme would not result in adverse impacts or unacceptable impacts on the historic environment. And in terms of energy and sustainability, it's considered to comply with latest building regs, which actually would exceed the aims of what our current policy requires in that regard. So in conclusion, the principle of development is already established, the outline. It does secure acceptable levels of open space. It retains natural features. Its density has been reduced further by virtue of the increased number of bungalows, which would further improve those landscape impacts of the development, and they include acceptable design. The development has been amended from the previous and is now still, as officers would consider, is predominantly single story. All of those bungalows will be M42 compliant in line with the aims of MP7, which is, substantial benefit to that scheme. It does include a high proportion of 2-bedroom dwellings as well, which meets with the aims of policy MP7. It's acknowledged it doesn't fully align with the housing mix in terms of the needs assessment undertaken by Sutton Parish Council, and therefore there is partial conflict with policies HOU1 and MP7. The Sutton Housing Needs Assessment, which informs the emerging policy for the Sutton Neighbourhood Plan, is yet to be considered at examination of that replacement neighbourhood plan, and therefore that needs to be considered in terms of the weight to be afforded to it. It is acknowledged, though, that the requirements of the particular allocation does place constraints on the deliverability of larger homes and smaller 1-bedroom properties. And as referenced in the officer report, the applicant, in appealing the most recent refusal on the site, has raised concerns over the viability of achieving alignment with that latest housing mix. Nonetheless, the parcel conflict is noted to be balanced in the merits of the scheme. So there are no concerns in terms of amenity for future occupiers of this development, and the amendments have been made to position the acoustic fence, which is now further away to that previous arrangement, with that focus on the eastern boundary where the fence has been moved over 2 metres to around 11 metres, therefore providing further relief to outlook whilst restricting views into the private garden and continuing to reduce noise transference. It's considered that layout would be effective in minimising noise and potential ASB impacts to those occupiers of 10 Oaks Lane, and conditions are proposed which would further ensure long-term management of that open space, and that boundary treatments are in place at that location at point of commencement pretty much. So one of the first things that needs to go in. As mentioned, the alternative proposal has been carefully considered, but it's considered that the proposed arrangement is the most reasonable, having regard to protecting the amenities of existing residents and future occupiers of this development. Again, whilst there is some conflict with the housing mix, the development largely accords with the vision of the Sutton Neighbourhood Plan that it achieves predominantly single-storey dwellings, a greater number of two-bedroom dwellings. It caters for an ageing population, with 2/3 of the scheme proposed to be accessible and adaptable. Achieving full compliance with the housing mix policy is possibly constrained in part by the allocation policy itself, and that which needs to deliver low-density dwellings. The proposal was considered to be predominantly single-storey, and I think I've got to repeat on that one. So on balance, the development is considered to accord with the development plan when taken as a whole, and the amendments have further addressed those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have objectors, Pete Woods and Laura Woods. Would you like to come up and speak? You've got 5 minutes, and an amber light comes on at 4.
Sorry, I wonder if we could have the fan off again, please. It's making a terrible noise.
Right, okay. Good afternoon, I'm Mum. You will have seen the letter dated the 1st of March from our solicitors setting out our concerns. Although we appreciate the steps that have been made so far, there are still vital outstanding problems. We have put immense thought, effort, and money into designing and building a bespoke lifetime home to meet the complex needs of our severely disabled son. We are the only people who have the expertise to do this, having cared for him day and night for the last 19 years and having given up our careers to do so. Oaks Lane has given us the freedom to run a care home employing and managing a team of 9 carers. Our son has a severe learning disability. He senses the world around him very differently to a typical person, and this leads to behaviours that are disturbing to those who do not know and love him. His disability is far too complex to describe succinctly. We're happy to answer questions in a private hearing where his dignity is protected. Our son is supported by adult social services. They have determined that his home and care team, they call it a setting, is the best possible long-term environment in which he should remain. The objections from social services are from people who work daily with complex needs and disabilities, and who champion the public sector equality duty. They know what they're talking about based on actual lived experience. When they say that this application represents a very significant risk to our son and that the consequences would be very severe, that is the collapse of the care setting, then they must be listened to. If this setting fails, then the real risk is that he will have to be housed and cared for in a much inferior setting, severely affecting his liberty and quality of life, out of this county, possibly hundreds of miles away from us, and from the loving life he has always known. This would destroy us as a family. We are bound by the Mental Capacity Act to make decisions in his best interests, and we believe that those are served by ensuring that he can live in his bespoke home for the rest of his life, estimated to be another 40 plus years, free from unlawful discrimination, harassment and victimisation. We and social services believe this planning application puts our son's setting at risk of failure. Social services have said that as a result of his protected characteristics, his needs around privacy in his home and garden manifest differently to the vast majority of the population. These must be taken into consideration, and evidence showing how those have been taken into account made available as part of the decision-making in relation to this planning application. The adverse impacts on our son that social services identify are not recognised, acknowledged or discussed anywhere by the planning officer. There is no evidence that the planning officer has understood the impact of the decision on our son, and our recent data subject access request has revealed that they have not created a record of their thinking or a record of important meetings, such as the 2 hours spent by us showing the planning officer around our son's home environment. Why were no notes taken to inform the decision-making process? Policy ENV2 says that you must ensure that there is no significantly detrimental effect on the residential amenity of nearby occupiers. It is clear to us and social services that this application will have a very significant detrimental impact. It will expose our son to harassment and victimisation, and the overbearing nature of the fencing will have a very significant impact on his ability to use his therapeutic garden. Either of these could result in his being unable to live in his own home. We have proposed an easy and simple adjustment to make the development more acceptable. Your officer has failed to consider whether our request to adjust the fencing is reasonable and has consistently refused to meet with us to consider it. We have read the recent PSED guidance for public authorities, which sets out best practice, and there is a duty to make reasonable adjustments for people with disabilities. The guidance says that the decision maker must give real consideration to the duty as part of the decision-making process. It must also be exercised fully, rigorously, and with an open mind. Decision makers should be aware of potential impacts of a decision. Why would your officer not have a roundtable discussion with us and the other consultees, as repeatedly requested? We were told that Abby would not attend, but the duty is on the council, not on Abby. Why did your officer forbid the consultants writing the EQIA to speak to us? And why were we barred from consultation in their brief? The resulting EQIA doesn't identify, describe, or analyse the impacts on our son. No one from ECDC or their consultees have ever asked a single question about our son's disability or needs. They have never met him or made any attempt to communicate directly with him. We believe that our son's needs have not been taken into consideration in arriving at their recommendations. These are complex issues. Decisions are highly consequential and irreversible. The effects will ripple throughout our son's life. All disabled people are different. We are the experts on our son, followed by social services. We're here in front of you. Please ask us in the closed session. Thank you.
Thank you. You went 40 over. You went 40 over. So I will be giving, if they want it, the applicants do have 40 seconds extra time if you want it when you come to speak. Now, as I understand it, we would be advised if members have questions to go into exempt session after we've had all the speakers. That is correct.
Yes, Chair, correct.
So as it stands at the moment, there won't be any questions to Mr. and Mrs. Woods. Okay. So thank you. We'll speak to you again. And now we have John Brindley on behalf of the applicant. John Brindley? No, sorry, you can go back to the seats. We've got other speakers. You've got 5 minutes plus 40, Mr. Brindley, and you should put the microphone on. Thank you.
My name is John Brindley. I'm Town Planning Director at CMYK. and we're the agents acting on behalf of the applicant Abbey Developments. The site has outlined planning permission for up to 53 dwellings. This reserved matters application makes revisions to the previous reserved matters application, which was refused contrary to the officer's recommendation for approval at committee in April last year. Refused for the following 3 reasons. The proposed development does not contain predominantly single-storey dwellings. The mix of the market housing proposed on site fails to contribute to meeting the needs of the village. The proposal is therefore contrary to policy, neighbourhood plan policy MP7. The location of the acoustic fence adjacent to the boundary of Ten Oaks Lane results in a poor outlook for residents of this property. On the basis of these 3 reasons for refusal, all other aspects of the scheme are deemed to have been acceptable, such as the road layout, surface water drainage scheme, the amount of public open space, the provision of the ecological areas to the north and southern end of the site, the number of trees being retained, the amenity of the existing dwellings on garden close being sufficiently protected, preserving and enhancing views from in and out of the site. The main changes to the scheme as part of this reserved matters application are as follows. A reduction in the number of dwellings from 47 to 41 units, an increase in the number of single-storey dwellings from 55% to 66%, and amendments to the mix of the scheme. The acoustic fence to the north of the site has been moved further away from the boundary with Ten Oaks Lane. As a result of these changes, the density of the site is now at 13 dwellings per hectare. The amount of single-storey dwellings is 66%, and the number of 2-bed dwellings provided is 44%, the most of any dwelling type on the site. The acoustic fence has been moved away from the boundary with Ten Oaks Lane by approximately 1 metre on the southern boundary and between 2 metres and 3.5 metres on the eastern boundary. The proposed dwellings closest to Ten Oaks Lane will be single-storey and will be between 20 metres and 28 metres away from the boundary with Ten Oaks Lane. The adopted neighbourhood plan policy allocating this site contained the following requirements. The site should be predominantly